Today is the 26th of March, and today the judgment of the Electoral Court was handed down. For those of you who don't know, the ANC took the MK political party to court over the use of the name MK as well as the use of the MK logo, which in both cases the ANC claims belongs to the ANC. The ANC also wanted the MK party to be removed from the ballot papers. In other words, the ANC wants the MK party to be disqualified from the elections on the 29th of May. As most of you should know by now, the courts ruled in favour of the MK party, which is now free to take part in the elections and will appear on the ballot papers. You might be wondering where I'm going with this, so I will explain. First, I would like you to watch this short clip from a video available online. I hope I don't get a copy strike for placing it here. Watch this and I will carry on this conversation afterwards.
Hear me very carefully. Yes. This country will be turned into civil war. Yeah! The day that MK is not allowed to campaign and to be on the ballot paper, no one will vote. No one in this country will vote. We will make sure of it. No one in this country will vote. If MK is not on the ballot paper,
we are sending a loud and clear message that if these courts, which are sometimes captured, if they stop MK, there will be anarchy in this country. There will be riots like you've never seen in this country. There'll be no election. No South African will go to the polls if MK is not on the ballot paper.
Now that you have watched that brief clip, I have just one question for you, and that is this. If the courts had ruled against the MK party and all hell broke loose in this country today, would you have been ready for it? I can just hear those saying, no problem. I have solar, I have a water tank, and I have food. I also live inside a security complex, so I am protected 24/7. I guess this would be the best case scenario for anyone living in the suburbs or any of the larger cities. I live on the East Rand, so I will base my response to the scenario on the area in which I live, which I consider to be a pretty good example. If you didn't know, the East Rand is basically surrounded by informal settlements in which literally millions of people live. A huge chunk of those people rely on a SASSA grant every month for their survival. So let's do a bit of a hypothetical analysis of what could possibly happen here in the event that total chaos breaks out in the country. As I said, I will give you what I think many consider to be best case scenario. First, in my experience, most of us have no idea what is happening next door to us, never mind what is happening in the rest of the country. So let's take a look at a hypothetical situation. Joe Soap is sitting at home watching his favorite soapy on SABC with a cold beer in his hand. He has no idea that there was even a court case between the ANC and the MK party, let alone that the courts had handed down a ruling today. Joe heard on the SABC news that there was some rioting and violence somewhere in the Johannesburg area, but there's always trouble somewhere, isn't there? So Joe ignores it and carries on with his life as if nothing is wrong. At the end of the evening, he goes to bed after having a couple too many and sleeps like a baby. Next morning, he wakes to find that the power is off. He checks his favorite load shedding app and sees that there is no load shedding scheduled for today. What's new, right? He gets dressed and heads off to the office for work. On his way there, he encounters unusually heavy traffic, which eventually comes to a standstill. He notices some cars heading in his direction on the wrong side of the road. He notices that they all have smashed windscreens and were in a huge hurry to get out of the area. He immediately and correctly assumes that there is trouble up ahead, and there must be some kind of protest or violence happening, and decides to try and make a U-turn himself. Unfortunately, everyone in the 1 kilometer long queue has the same idea, and chaos breaks out. Now he can hear the gunshots and can see smoke in the distance. He now knows there is serious trouble ahead. Eventually, he makes it out of the chaos and turns on the radio in his car to see if he can hear what is happening. It just so happens that it is news time on his favorite radio station, and he hears, to his horror, that there is violence spreading throughout the country at an alarming rate. Now he hears about the court ruling and the penny drops. He decides to go home to be with his wife and 2 children of 2 years old and 6 months. When he opens the front door, his wife is standing at the door with her 2 children in her arms in tears. She leads him to the television in the living room. There he sees that the violence is far worse than he thought. Every major center is experiencing violence that is spreading and escalating fast. No problem, Joe thinks. He checks the security gates and makes sure that the security personnel are on duty at the gate. He calms his wife down and tells her that they are perfectly safe in their house. After all, they have everything they need. That night they have a meal in silence while they know what is going on in the informal settlements just 8 kilometers away. They go to bed, but sleep doesn't come, and by 3 in the next morning they are awoken by the sound of what sounds like explosions and gunshots in the distance. Joe once again reassures his wife that they are perfectly safe behind their security gates and security personnel at the boom gate. The next day is filled with the same noises, and by the time they go to bed, the power has not come back on yet. No problem, Joe thinks. I have solar. Still, Joe is confident that they are as safe as can be where they are, but those gunshots are definitely getting closer now. Late that night, the power still has not returned, and when he tried to contact the office, the cell tower was also dead. Now Joe and his family don't have power, and they don't have any direct communication to the outside world. No power besides their solar, that is, limited solar. The television is all they have, and all they are now being told is that the police have everything under control. In the meantime, a neighbor shouts from next door saying that he heard over his radio network that shopping centers all over the country are being raided and plundered because the people living in the informal settlements have run out of food, and the water is now also drying up in the higher lying areas. To cut the story shorter by a week or so, Joe has now realized that there is no police, there is no army to protect anyone, and they are literally on their own. Joe remembers that he has a .38 special revolver that he inherited from his father 10 years ago, and asks his wife for the safe key. She replies that he has them. He is sure that she has them. Between them, they frantically turn the drawers and cupboards upside down, and after 3 hours of screaming and shouting at each other, Joe finds the key in his bedside drawer among a lot of other rubbish. He grabs the key and opens the safe to find his father's revolver very rusty, and there are only 6 bullets in the gun, which have been there for the last 10 years. There is no other ammunition. It was at about this time when Joe's wife flushed the toilet, and it overflowed, covering the bathroom floor in sewage. To their amazement, the toilet system does not refill. Joe opens the basin tap and realizes that there is no water. The tank must be empty. Right about then, his eldest child says that she has a dirty nappy. No problem, he says, there is a packet of wet wipes in the cupboard. To his amazement, he finds that there are only 3 wet wipes left in the packet. His wife says that today was actually her shopping day. By now, the house is a mess. The toilet will not stop overflowing, and the solar system is not keeping up with the household power draw. Although Joe has power, and the lights are still burning at night, there is no water coming out of the taps, and the cool drink and the beer he had in the fridge has run out. The children are hungry and thirsty, but Joe knows that he dare not leave his house. He walks down to the security at the gate and gets no reply, but it is clear that there is nobody on duty. By the sounds coming from the direction of the informal settlement, it is clear to Joe that the chaos is creeping ever closer to their complex, but there is absolutely nothing he can do about it. His neighbors have organized a watch register to man the gate, but there is only 3 firearms available between all of them, including Joe's rusty .38 special and 6 very old, dodgy rounds of ammunition. The water situation has become desperate, and Joe and a few others have decided that they will have to leave the complex to see if they can find water. They pile every container into their cars and head out the boom. It quickly becomes clear to Joe that his chances of finding water is basically zero. He can see many other people in the suburbs running around testing garden taps and fire hydrants. All of their containers are empty. Joe has now seen that houses about a kilometer away are standing open, and a few of them may have even been burned to the ground. There are people running between these houses carrying anything they can find in the way of food or drink. He quickly decides to return home to his now desperate family, who have resorted to drinking the water from the small kiddies' pool outside on the lawn. Joe lays awake that night listening to people screaming in the streets, gunshots going off, and the glow of fire flickering behind closed blinds. The next morning, tired, thirsty and hungry, Joe makes the decision to pack his family into their car and drive to somewhere safer. They quickly bundle some belongings and valuables into a few bags, throw them in the boot, and head out as fast as their car will take them. To Joe's horror, he discovers that the car only has less than a quarter tank of fuel in it. He says nothing and puts his foot flat. He soon meets the mobs, who seem to appear out of nowhere, and the stones start hitting the car with deafening crashing sounds. I won't carry on because I think you know what happened to Joe, his wife, and his 2 children. Can you even imagine yourself in this situation? I ask again, are you ready for something like this? Remember, this could quite easily have been the scenario right now if the court had decided against the MK party earlier today. I want you to think long and hard about it. Would you be able to hold up and survive indefinitely if that were to happen today? Even those living in the suburbs, not in complexes. At night you are going to be a lighthouse with your fancy solar system. Light means people, and people means food and water. Do you really think that it is worth taking the chance of not being prepared? Do you still think it is a good idea to lock yourself up in your house and believe you will be okay? Do you have an adequate means of defending yourself and your family should you need to do so? There are a few things everyone needs to know. There's no telling when chaos could break out. It could quite easily have been today. When or if it does, it won't be long before all services come to a crashing halt, including electricity supply, which in turn is responsible for water supply as well as sewage pumping. Staff who work at the sewage treatment works, the water works, the power stations, etc., will not be able to get to work at all. That is, those that aren't part of the marauding mobs, that is. If your house is situated lower than others in the vicinity, you must expect it to be flooded with sewage when the pumps stop pumping it away. How many of you are prepared for and have a plan to deal with a toilet that keeps overflowing with raw sewage? There is no way that you can live in a house full of sewage. How many of you have a long drop toilet or some other kind of temporary toilet in your backyard? How many of you would be able to sustain yourself and your family with food and water for more than a week or 2 without leaving your house? I'm not saying that bunkering down in your house is a bad idea, and I'm not advocating that you evacuate. All I'm trying to say is whatever you decide to do, whether it is to stay at home or evacuate, commit to that plan and try to think of every possible thing that could go wrong, and then try to come up with a solution for it. I'm also not going to try and tell you what to do. We are all adults here, and we decide for ourselves what we are going to do, should the proverbial hit the fan. As I have already said, it could literally have started today if the court's decision had gone the other way. Ask yourself whether you would have been ready and prepared for it. If not, please do something about it. My advice is to do whatever you can to stay informed as to what is happening in the country at all times, and please, watching the news on SABC is not going to do it. Find alternative sources for news. There are some excellent news channels on YouTube if you are prepared to wade through all the biased propaganda and plain lies out there. Once you have had some proper exposure, it becomes quite easy to spot the liars and the biased content. Please click the like button and share this content with others. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notifications. As always, until next time, be safe out there.